please.
Chairman Michael.
Here.
Brendan Howard.
Here.
Walter Henry.
Here.
Reed Weigel.
Here.
Megan Schreiber.
Here.
Mike Sessalone. Deb Rice.
And we have a forum. So we have minutes from September 9th. Any additions or corrections? Motion to approve.
Second.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. First zoning case 6196 MD A1 to E2 in Manhattan. Emmett?
Yes, this is a case of, it's a single-family home on the property. Currently it's zoned to A1. At some point in 2008, 2006, the current lot configuration was created, and the applicant's looking to just bring the current existing structures and parcel into compliance with the Will County zoning ordinance, and it meets the criteria of E2 for as far as lot size, frontage, and then obviously the variances are for the rear setback, in the lot area, I'm sorry. And there is E2 in the area, so it's not something that's unfamiliar to the area. In fact, there's several parcels right near the subject parcel that are about equivalent to the same size. So really this is just an effort to bring the current property into compliance.
Motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objection to this change? Any other questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. New business, building code adjustments. Reed, your president. Thank you, Chairman.
This body passed an amendment to the zoning code last month, which permits proprietors of structures in areas zoned industrial to obtain special use permits to construct or maintain residences for themselves in such areas. That amendment was inspired by the case of Mr. Sam Reichert, Plainfield, our township highway commissioner, who sadly passed away last Sunday of an apparent heart attack. That's my sad duty to inform this committee of that tragic occurrence. After the zoning amendment removed a major obstacle to Mr. Reichert's being able to realize his dream of constructing a house in that industrialized zone, he was confronted with yet another obstacle, one imposed by our current fire code, that requires sprinkler systems to be installed in residences in industrialized zones. So, in effect, what we did last month in creating a special use permit in an industrialized zone for a residential area, or for residents rather, basically is being frustrated for all practical purposes by this fire sprinkler requirement, which is pretty much cost prohibitive for most sole proprietors. So I am asking this committee to consider directing our land use department to draft mandatory language that is very narrowly crafted to ameliorate this type of situation. And I'd like to have it include some of the following provisions. One is that we exempt proprietors who do obtain a special use permit to maintain a residence from this sprinkler requirement. The first condition is that they do get that special use permit. A second condition I would suggest is that for all unattached residences. A third requirement would be that this exemption would also apply to residences that are attached to structures for personal storage, not commercial, but for personal storage. Or it also would apply to attached residences for commercial structures with a fire area that is 2,000 square feet or less in area. And that we require such an attached structure to be separated by a firewall and that it be equipped with smoke and fire detectors. I think that by doing so, if we adopt this, we would give force to that exception to the building code that we passed just last month, instead of frustrating its purposes, and yet it would strike a nice balance in that we would protect the safety of our firefighters should such a structure catch on fire because of its size. That size limit, I actually learned from my own Plainfield Fire Protection District. This seems to perfectly well comply with what their requirements are. Structures of 2,000 feet or less are not required to have a fire sprinkler installed. It would also treat residences the same way as we treat residences in residential developments, so there would be consistency there. I think that this would all strike a nice balance with all the competing interests of safety, and yet allowing people to realize when there's no real threat being posed to the general public to have such things as a residence in industrial zone, since we now do have a special use permit that permits that. So I'm proposing that this committee take a vote today and advise our land use department to draft some mandatory language, and that when this committee passes it, that we bring this forward to the full board in the near future.
Okay, thank you. Any questions by committee? Comments? No.
Staff comments?
Ready to go.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, Land Use Development Review. Just a few comments. When County Board Member Bible proposed this, I began trying to craft at least some form of text that would allow these things that are being spoken of today to be put before this committee and then the county board. There are three areas that I wish to have a little clarity on going forward now. Member Bible has presented a number of things that may run in tandem, but the first thing is that we have this for the proprietor, which is owner operated, owner occupied. So that would be something that if someone owned it and wanted a watchman or so, it isn't that, it's basically for the owner to occupy that themselves. That was my initial thought. If that's correct, I would like to go forward with that. And then secondly, as we go through the process, many of the zoning uses run with the property or run with the land. With this, if there is a change in ownership, do we sunset it upon the change so that the new occupant comes back to us and says, okay, well, I'm going to be doing this. This is a commercial building, and this is a structure within that building, so that we're aware of this. This is not a detached structure. This is a structure within the commercial building. So if, in fact, the next occupant may be doing something differently with that section that is commercial, so at least at that point we have an ability to tell them that you don't have fire suppression, and if you use this, it might not be a subtle use. It may not be collecting memorabilia. It might be repairing trucks. So I'm just suggesting that we have that form to run with the actual owner upon conveyance or upon property sale. The sunset clause would kick in, and the new owners would have to come back for additional review. If that is something.
Yes, I do. In fact, Mr. Saplinski, thank you. Very good comment. I did preface my criteria list with that the owner would have to have a special use permit. And inherent in that, to be in compliance with the zoning requirement, you would have to be a proprietor. You couldn't be a caretaker or some other party. So when that person, as in the case, for example, with Mr. Reichert, who's now deceased, he does have a wife that survives him, but if it were just Mr. Reichert, that special use permit now would no longer exist, as you have sunsetted, and any subsequent owner would now have to apply for a special use permit just to even be able to start the process of having a residence. And then that residence would have to comply with the building codes. And I have this criteria that residence would have to comply with, one of which is, of course, this is not as critical an issue if it's an unattached structure. But even if it is, there's square footage size and some other precautionary measures that could be taken. But I still think makes it reasonable for a proprietor to be able to be allowed to assume any liability risks. And because they have, I think that's part of basic property rights, is that when your rights don't really conflict with the general public, that the scale on the tip in favor of that individual owner as opposed to society in these cases. And in the case of the Reicherts, in such an isolated wooded area, that seems to be the case here.
We're in complete concurrence there. I think the last point I had, and this is distance to a public water source. This has a huge impact on sprinkler, simply because it's much easier to run a 4 or 6 inch main to a property from a public water source than it is to put a 2,000 or 5,000 gallon holding tank, a fire pump, dedicated service, all this other costs that would have to be assumed. There are usual distances that they have up to 300 and 400 feet away. It might be looked at if this panel, as well as others, would provide a possible distance, so that in future, if we do have someone that comes in and they basically have a water main from a public service in front of them, that it's not that cost prohibitive to actually provide that additional layer of fire safety. It would just be the distance that I would ask for this panel to give me some direction on, so that I could embody that into the test channel.
Comment, Steve?
Yeah, you know, my opinion, I agree with Mr. Bible, and I don't believe that if a person owns commercial property and they want to live in a house that they build on their commercial property, they should be denied. I think that's an abuse of property rights. And if they sell their property, the people that are buying their property look at it and say there's a home there. And they plan on living in there themselves, or maybe they don't want to live there, just leave it vacant. But I don't see any reason why anyone should have to go back again to do any changes to it or anything like that, and to get another special use permit. I mean, if you own property, it's your property. You have the right to use it. And what Ray is saying is, let's be more safe with sprinklers. Well, the sprinkling thing is getting way out of hand. There's a lot of businesses that are saying, hey, I ain't going where I have to get a sprinkler. I have a little bitty building, and it costs $3,000 or $4,000 for the sprinkler, and then you got to have it inspected every year by a certified inspector who is a fireman. And in my opinion, it's just a big chunk of money, and all we're doing is creating another layer of government on top of a layer of government, and giving government more power to inflict damage as far as monetary goes to the citizens.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate Steve's spirit in this, and in an ideal world, I would go along with you all the way on that, Steve, but I want to take a more incremental change approach if it meets with the majority of the committee in that. I had some specific exceptions carved out, and that was if it's attached to a personal use storage structure only, or if it is a commercial structure, that it be 2,000 square feet or less, because I'm concerned about the safety of the firefighters, that if there is a fire in such a structure, maximizing or optimizing their opportunities to leave that fire alive. And I think that a structure of that size or smaller enhances their safety too, although I know firefighting is inherently dangerous, but we don't have to increase that danger for them by having them attend to fires in larger structures. And the 2,000 square footage of language comes from the International Fire Code. And so, and it seems to be perfectly squared with the fire protection district in my area, and I suspect probably in other townships as well. So I would still be for requiring a special use permit for subsequent owners, and I would like to limit it to 2,000 square feet or less fire footage area.
Well, I agree with what you said, except the part that if you own the property and you get the permit to build on your property, and then you sell your property or convey it like Mr. Reichert will convey it to his family, now another special use permit has to be issued, I find that deplorable. I think that if it's okay the first time, the county doesn't need to make them go through the same process the second time. No, and the other thing, like with your 2,000 square foot, I think that's fine, and I like that. But we also can look at a different thing. What happens if, when they build these structures, if they build it out of cinder block and they have the walls, every wall out of cinder block, and it goes 3 foot over the roof, where every room is fireproof, and now they're going to say they want to say you need a sprinkler? Well, why do you need a sprinkler if every room is fireproof? You know, I mean, we could go into a lot of things, but I think the sprinkler thing is all about making money for certain companies and certain groups of people. And, you know, I'm opposed to that.
In response to both Reed and Steve, I understand your point, Steve, but, you know, when land or property is conveyed, and you said, oh, if it's conveyed to his family, but that's not the case in every situation, and we all know that you always can't pick your family either, and your family could make a different decision on how that property is going to be used in a different way, as well as a different property owner, and that's where we have to protect ourselves, is that this property could be used for a different use. Like you said, Reed, it's not necessarily a storage for memorabilia like what Mr. Reichert said, but it could be a heavier use, you know, and so that's where we want this new property to come before us to see what the difference is in that. So, you know, I do go along.
Isn't a restaurant a commercial thing, and how many restaurants have people live upstairs or in back of the restaurant? You know, the owners. I mean, we can really start getting really particular, but a lot of businesses are, the owner lives there.
Mr. Balish brings up another point that I also nearly overlooked, is that if we do have a residence there, I want it to be a residence that is not possibly classified under the International Fire Code as an R1 through R4 classification, which basically is commercial residential areas like assisted living environments or boarding houses, that kind of stuff. I don't want those to be permitted in this type of area too.
Ray, when you mentioned the distance to the water line, what was that in reference to again?
That was in reference to the viability for a property to tap onto a public water source. And typically, I'm seeing the distances between 100 and 200 feet. If a building is constructed, these are all new buildings too, not currently operating owned buildings. But if it's a new building and it's within 200 feet, it's considered viable for them to bring that water source into the building for fire suppression.
Okay.
So I was looking at any distance from 100 to 500 feet, but 200 seems to be what continually comes up because they're meeting their 100-foot setback in many cases, and then to their sprinkler room could be another up to 100 feet. So it just seemed to be something that was being used in the industry, and it was considered a number that was worth consideration.
200 sounds reasonable. Anybody on the committee in agreement or disagreement with that? I don't see any problem with that.
My last comment was just to caution, as Mr. Bible has gone and spoken with his fire protection district, understand that there are 38 within Will County. And this is commercial, this is not residential, this is an R2 use out of the R1, 2, 3, and 4. R2 use in an industrial or commercial setting, the IBC or 2012 International Building Code. We adopt that and we can amend that. However, the local fire protection districts do have their own council, they do have their own enforcement and their own laws. And in many cases, we have one in a residential sense where the fire protection district can in fact enforce their sprinkling and fire suppression. That could occur too in a commercial sense, so that we have to temper this, that while we may be changing this, we might allow this particular use. There may be other fire protection districts other than the one governing that may be more restrictive, and they are capable of enforcing their own codes. We won't do it as a county, but they will as a fire protection district.
Okay. Do you have enough direction now as to what I bring forward?
Mr. Chairman, I think it would help that if Mr. Bible would be so kind as to once again kind of tick off the items of concern to you, so that be sure we not only record them in the minutes, but got them up here so everybody can see it and we know we're all on the same page.
And so that I can hang in the wind on them too instead of you. All right. first criterion was unattached residence. The second one is a structure used for if it's attached to a structure used for personal storage only.
Can you change the font up there, please? Thank you.
Okay? My third was if it is a commercial structure to which the residence is attached, that it has a fire area of 2,000 square feet or less, and said structure is separated by a firewall and equipped with a smoke/fire detector. Next would be that none of the residential uses could be classified as R1 through R4 under the International Fire Code. And then finally, what Mr. Simplinsky was suggesting about being within a certain distance of a water source. 200 feet, what we were saying?
200 feet seems
That would be a
agreeable.
requirement that they do have a water supply of some sort.
The public water source.
So, Mr. Chairman, if this then does in fact represent the consensus direction of the committee, staff will use these as kind of the guidelines for developing specific legislation, proposed text of legislation that would accomplish this purpose and bring it back to you at your next meeting. Is that my understanding of your path forward?
That would be fine. Have a motion to direct staff.
So moved. Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Next item is medical marijuana discussion. Is that you, David?
Yes, it's my understanding is that this concern has been brought up at prior meetings and was assigned to the executive committee. I did bring the text of the current requirements for medical cannabis cultivation centers and dispensing organizations. And if you recall, the board did pass in March provisions that authorized the cannabis cultivation centers permitted uses in the A1, I1, I2, and I3 zoning districts, and dispensing organizations, the special use permits in the A1, C1 through C4, and I1 through I3 zoning districts. And that's the current provisions of the ordinance, and so I think the purpose of today's meeting was to discuss any concerns that any committee members may have or the board members may have and how they would want to address those in the future.
I think Mr. Musis brought up the fact he thought there should be special use permits for future applicants. If they've already applied, it wouldn't apply, but if anybody in the future after we change the ordinance would have to get a special use permit. Is there any feeling among the board members that this would be a good thing or not? I think originally we thought it should be wide open and would be a good thing for the county to land one of these properties for cultivation centers, would increase the tax base. Maybe there's residents that wouldn't want them in their neighborhood. Right.
My mind hasn't changed. I'm still for, our original vote on that. The legislation clearly states that one of these operations can't be within 2,500 feet of residential or school or daycare, so I'm not going to change.
And I agree.
You don't think we should change it or special?
I correct.
I agree with the young ladies.
Okay.
I've never been a fan of this medical marijuana. I think it's just the camel's noses in the tent. This is going to lead to recreational marijuana. I don't think this is doing the best thing for our community. I question how many actual people actually eat medical marijuana. None of that's been brought forth. I would be a little more of the the idea that we probably should restrict this. So I would probably, I would support it if there were votes to.
So we have one person that's in favor of the special use permit. So maybe we need a motion just to not require a special use permit in the future at this time.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, second. Roll call vote, please.
Tom Weigel,
Yes.
Robert Howard,
We're voting that we don't need.
Yes.
Yes.
Walter Adamick,
No.
Ray Bible,
You gotta go to the other meeting.
Regan Franke,
Yes.
Mike Frizzola, Beth Rice.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll stay with the status quo for now.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, that'll be reported back to executive as having been the vote of the Land Use Committee on this subject.
Yes, we can. Next item is agreement on rain gauges. Derick?
Thank you. Before you today is the joint funding agreement, the USGS and the County of Will. The intent of the agreement is to maintain funding for maintenance of the rain gauges that the county has installed. The Stormwater Committee recommends the approval of the joint funding agreement. Under the Stormwater Plan, it recommends enhancement of the stream and rain gauge network throughout the county, which is continues that effort. They plan on throughout their annual budgets to budget for this expense over the next 3 years to continue the operation of the rain gauges. So I recommend approval.
Questions?
What do those rain gauges look like? Where are they at? That kind of, is it just the glass?
Well, it depends. Some are mounted on the stream gauge, stream gauge itself. If it's a standalone rain gauge, it's essentially a mast that's mounted to the ground. And there's a few different boxes that hold the electrical equipment. And then it's essentially like a tip bucket design. There are other designs that's more like a pad, but that's still a little unreliable as far as accuracy. So primarily you'll see a couple different boxes, and there'll be a small antenna, because what we have done with these rain gauges is connected them automatically to the National Weather Services Forecast Center in Minneapolis. So then our local Chicago National Weather Service utilizes that data to provide more accurate radar and more accurate warnings and flood warnings. So
Are they mounted in buildings or?
they can be. Preferably it's on a somewhere that's more secure, so vandalism is reduced. But the USGS could install either way. It could be on a building, which some of them we have are. Others are essentially on the ground, and it's just like I said, a freestanding mast or a pole that the equipment is mounted on.
Thank you.
We're being asked to contribute monies towards this, right?
That's right. For the benefit.
Why would we not be funding this in whole? What is it that we actually gain? I mean, obviously you get the data of, okay, here's how much rain they had, and flood and all that. Why isn't it not their full
USGS is not,
responsibility?
it's a service they're providing. They're not obligated to install rain gauges or river gauges. The communities themselves are the ones that kind of drive that need. In this instance for the county, we have multiple rain gauges as well as multiple stream gauges. The stream gauges and rain gauges at times work in tandem to forecast flood events. So when a certain amount of rain falls, the rain gauges capture that information. It's known fairly quickly, almost immediately. And flood warnings and disasters can be not averted, but at least made aware of, so that local EMAs, townships, county, and the residents themselves can take proper precaution. In addition to that, it helps with modeling or calibrating current and future floodplain models, so the floodplains become more accurate.
And there's a third point, and it's escaping me, and I apologize. For watershed planning. It helps for watershed planning as well, which is becoming more and more prevalent, really nationally, to do watershed planning, not only on a flood conveyance and flood management aspect, but also as a water quality aspect, and having rain depths and rainfall information related to the watershed is an important technical factor.
Ms. Miller really asked her why they aren't paying this in full. I mean, okay, there's some benefit here, but I think that'd be something that they pay in full rather than.
No, that's not generally how they do that.
Reagan, it is what it is.
Just looking at the different gauges that we have, I mean, have we ever looked into consolidating some of them? I mean, we have one in Wilton Center, Elwood. I mean, there's two in my district. Moniz not too far from me, Manhattan, Frankfurt. I mean, I just wonder if there's...
No, that's kind of the whole point.
Okay.
Is you've got to remember, there's an existing network there that was stream gauges and river and rain gauges. Typically, they're placed along bigger river basins, like DuPage, Des Plaines, Kankakee. There's a few out in the Creek area. These gauges that you see today were installed last year, and we worked with the National Weather Service to try to fill in the holes that were existing, and they were located on different watersheds. Because the problem with the smaller watersheds is you don't have a lot of time between when rain falls and a flood event occurs. For instance, Des Plaines River, DuPage, or Kankakee, the bigger ones, after a heavy rainfall that's going to get it to flood stage, it's going to take 3-4 days. And we're going to know, if it's raining today for the next 24 hours, we're going to know Friday or Saturday it's going to be peaking. Plenty of time to prepare. These smaller river or stream watersheds, it might only be an hour storm that takes to get it to critical stage.
Okay.
So this rain gauge information, it's immediately known by the National Weather Service. They know it's rained, it's going to flood in the next couple of hours. They can send out a warning.
Okay.
So it's another way to get flood warnings out.
And then, I mean, this is obviously for any precipitation as well. I mean, we had a lot of problems in January, February, and that was more the freezing with.
It's not going to pick up snow.
Right. So, but again, I mean, that was a big issue for our residents. Flooding is something too that helps us be able to prepare and warn our residents as well as our EMA system.
Right, exactly right. I mean, and we just brought the hazard mitigation plan before the executive committee last Thursday. It was a 5-year update, and that's probably the primary risk for disaster threatening the county is flooding. So,
Mr. Howard? In my questions earlier, that's why I asked, what kind of unit it was, because if you're getting immediate responses out of this, if the information's being fed in there, then actually it's a life safety issue. So with this installation, I think, what's our portion of it? 21,000?
this is not installation. This is maintenance. They're
No,
already
correct.
there.
What's our portion of our cost?
It's about 21 or 22,000 a year.
21,000
For seven.
investment.
For 7 gauges.
To make Will County a safer place to live.
And just to point out, there's other gauges throughout the county that are funded by other groups. Plainfield Township helps fund one. The one in Shorewood is done by through Joliet, and I'm not bringing up the other group that's actually doing it now. There's a few other out in Crete. There are just various taxing bodies are contributing funding to maintain and operate these gauges.
This is funds that the Stormwater Committee has in their budget.
Yeah, they plan on committing the necessary dollars annually to make the payments.
Just one last curiosity question. How many of these rain gauges do we have countywide then? It seems like there's more.
Countywide, and then there's a map. If you go to land use department, we have a map that you can click on. I automated the map so you can go right to the forecasting center if there is a forecast available for that particular river gauge. But there are, and I should have had this ready, there's about 15 or so, 15 to 20 between river and rain gauges.
Okay, if there's no other comments, go ahead, a motion to approve. Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, that concludes our business. I don't have any reports. Any comments by members of the committee? Director, any comments?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just would point out that Derick O'Sullivan, who's been a valued member of our staff since 1999, is going to be moving on to a new opportunity early in November with one of our area's leading engineering firms. So I just wanted you to be aware of it. More recently, Derick has been very instrumental in keeping the work of the Stormwater Management Planning Committee going forward, and has always been a valuable assistance to us on all storm matter related topics. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention and let you have an opportunity to say goodbye to him.
Oh, we'll miss you, Derek. You've done a great job for us. Good luck on your new office.
I appreciate that. It's been quite an experience working here at the county for 15 years, and been through a lot of ups and downs with the economy, and learned a lot, and appreciate all the opportunities that I had.
I too will, like Jack will say in comments, thank you for your years of service, but I think it needs committee approval before you can do that.
Thank you.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess the county will have to get busy and start hiring some engineers.
That is correct, sir.
If there's no other business, have a motion to adjourn?
So
Motion second, all in favor say aye.